In the southern reach of the Wabash River lies a toll bridge. Like many old bridges, it came about from the explosive demand for the automobile in the early 20th century, but from there, its story is rather unique. First built and operated by private enterprise, it was later managed by a peculiar arrangement of government oversight. In its day, it was an important link along a once busy highway corridor, and it collected many tolls before finding itself at the center of a congressional investigation of corruption. Past its prime and now closed, it was abandoned by the government and orphaned, but still needed by the people in that region going about their daily lives. This is a story about a bridge with an uncertain future. Though not a major thoroughfare in its later years, the Harmony Way Bridge played a vital role in the southern region of Illinois and Indiana. Many of our roads and bridges in the United States are in need of repair or replacement. There's concern over finding the resources to get them fixed. The bridge at New Harmony is losing a battle for survival, and in that battle, an example of the tough choices presented by our nation's aging transportation infrastructure. The doubtful future of the bridge at New Harmony rests upon its own unique circumstance. Most bridges are managed by the state or local governments, but not so with this bridge. Opened for service in 1930, the bridge in New Harmony is independent of traditional government ownership, managed by a three-person commission chartered by the U.S. Congress. Automotive demand, according to bridge historian Dr. James Cooper, pushed the government in the early 20th century to find an alternative approach to bridge building.
The problem they faced in the 1920s was that demand was so great that they could not meet this demand. And we lived in an era in the 1920s in which private enterprise was quite highly valued in this Republican era, rather than government activity out there. And so Congress was far more open to allowing private enterprise to fill some of the gap.
In the eyes of engineers running highway departments during the progressive era of the early 20th century, privately run toll operations was contrary to the concept of public ownership and operation of roads and bridges. This tension between the realities of the political world for more bridges and the resistance of highway engineers planted the seeds for problems of ownership that the bridge would face throughout its life. The Wabash River is a major waterway whose headwaters spring in northern Indiana and run 475 miles to the Ohio River. Along that run, it has the distinction of being the longest free-flowing river in the United States. It's Indiana's river, one the state identifies closely, being the subject of its official state poem and state song.
On the banks of the Wabash far away.
Located along its banks is New Harmony, Indiana. A small community of 900, New Harmony began as a place of humble communal living by religious outcasts from Germany whose visions were both spiritual and commercial. The town's location along the Wabash was central to its founding.
They continued to buy land on both sides of the river because they were merchants, and they were producing textiles of all kinds, and whiskey, wine, and beer, and seeds and plants, and they were selling them all over the United States and in Europe as well. So they needed navigable waters, and the Wabash provided that for them.
The period of the 1920s and 30s following World War I was considered a golden age of road building, but by the late 20s there was still no bridge crossing the Wabash south of Vincennes, over 50 miles upstream from New Harmony. In 1893, the Times reported that a New Harmony landowner researched the idea, but others were less bullish, and the project never took hold. The push that made it happen didn't come from New Harmony, but originated from the Illinois side of the river, 15 miles away in Carmi. As the seat of government for White County, Carmi was a farming community of just under 3,000 in 1928, the largest town in the area, and city leaders saw the advantages of opening a major transportation artery through the region. The person who took that initiative and would hold considerable influence over the bridge's operation for 3 decades was Carmi newspaper publisher Roy Clippinger. As a boy, Clippinger learned to set type for his dad's paper. He moved to Carmi as a young adult, and by 1909, at the age of 23, he became the co-founder of the White County Tribune. The location Clippinger first chose for the bridge was not at New Harmony, but along a route between Carmi and Mount Vernon, Indiana, crossing the Wabash at the McGregor Ferry, one of the longest existing ferries in the area.
They were clearly interested in linking their area of southeastern Illinois around Carmi, White County, with Mount Vernon and Evansville. And so the transportation routing that the commerce they were seeking was basically further south than New Harmony.
The Wabash was classified as a navigable river, and therefore a private bridge company required a charter from the federal government. Passed into law in May 1928, those authorized under the statute, along with Clippinger, were banker Yules Pyle and building contractor Edgar Leathers, both from Carmi, along with Groves and Carmen Flesher, owners of the McGregor Ferry. Together, they organized their efforts as the Big Wabash Bridge Company. But those plans changed when the New York engineering firm hired to design the bridge determined the McGregor Ferry was not a suitable site and recommended a new location upstream at New Harmony. A new charter was amended to reflect the new site and signed into law in February 1929. With the McGregor Ferry no longer directly affected, Fletcher's left the partnership and the others reorganized as an Illinois corporation that was renamed Harmony Way Bridge Incorporated. Clippinger was under a tight deadline to get things started. Under federal law, construction had to begin within a year of the charter's passage. In this case, the original charter, signed the year before. That left only 61 days from the passage of the amended charter to begin construction. Before that happened, however, bridge plans had to be filed, a public hearing conducted, and then approval granted from government offices in Louisville, Cincinnati, and Washington. With only 5 days left on the clock, Harmony Way Bridge Incorporated broke ground on April 25, 1929. Bridge construction was formally signed with the Tennessee-based Nashville Bridge Company, who had by this time over 25 years' experience in bridge and barge construction. Carmi-based Leather Brothers laid out the earthen approaches, and the W.C. Gormley Company from Evansville erected the steel. The bridge would reach over 2,500 feet, almost half a mile in length. The plan chosen for the main spans was the curved-shaped Parker through truss design. Bridge engineers pushed that approach beyond its normal limits, with one span reaching 300 feet, the longest for that design in Indiana.
So they are remarkable. They're called a Parker truss system that is unusual, especially in the way in which the very center panels of those spans are braced. If you look at them as some kind of K trussing in the center parts of those spans.
A toll house would sit on the bridge, with workers walking across the highway to collect tolls, a flawed approach that would later produce a tragic result. Pouring concrete for the piers started in August 1929, but as the piers were going up, the stock market crashed in October, and the resulting economic depression soon halted construction. To keep things moving along, Harmony Way Bridge, Inc. arranged for the Nashville Bridge Company to become a major stockholder in the venture. A new corporation, the Harmony Way Bridge Company, was formed, and a stock transfer took place to Nashville Bridge, covering $165,000 of construction cost. Construction picked back up the following spring with the erection of the steel, a total of 59 train cars worth by the time the bridge was completed. As a young boy, James Walsh saw the bridge rise from the waters of the Wabash with a mixture of excitement and doubt.
Well, it was a big construction out in the country. And it was something that everybody looked at and commented with, maybe you'd say with awe at the time. Some people were very speculative as to whether it would ever be built. And of course, it was a topic of conversation with everyone that used it.
Well, I find it interesting that it was constructed in as short a period as it was constructed in. Today, it's nothing to spend 10 years or more on a bridge, and that was constructed in I think less than 2 years. So, and when you think about the methods that they had to use at that time, that's pretty fast. We don't do things nearly that quick anymore. So.
Major construction finished on December 13, 1930, with the pouring of the roadway's concrete. A small throng of people gathered for that moment, which was signaled by a blast from a whistle that, according to the Times, lasted until it ran out of steam. Construction came in at $800,000 without any serious accidents reported. 3 years after the effort to bridge the Wabash began, the official inauguration arrived on Tuesday, December 30, 1930. New Harmony Mayor Frank Steelman proclaimed the day as Bridge Dedication Day. This was to be the grandest turnout in New Harmony since the town's centennial celebration 26 years earlier. The New Harmony Times published a 32-page special edition covering every aspect of the dedication. 5,100 copies were printed and distributed, with editorial and printing support by Clippinger's Carmi Democrat Tribune. In that edition, the paper proclaimed a joy befitting the holiday season under the title New Harmony's Christmas Gift. Open your eyes, citizens of this splendid little town. On this Christmas morning, and as you look riverward, renew your faith in Santa Claus, for the vision that awaits you, a vision so wonderful that, like Rip Van Winkle in the mountains, you rub your eyes in bewilderment at the sight you behold. A brand new bridge of steel in its cardinal coat, resting upon pillars of concrete deep-rooted in the Wabash. All that was needed was the far-seeing vision of men of enterprise, and this was supplied by Mr. Roy Clippinger and his associates, who in the role of Santa Claus have given this town today great reason to be thankful.
Oh, there was a lot of anticipation about that. They hardly thought he would ever get it done. They didn't think he was a big enough politician. You know, all things like that require a little political skill with both sides of the river to get it done. And there's very few people who give him credit for being able to get that done.
On that day, by some estimates, the town of New Harmony swelled from its normal population of over 1,000 to approximately 10 to 15,000 people. The event began on a bright, crisp December morning on the bridge's center span. Roy Clippinger's son Earl cut the ribbon, and Mabel Pyle christened the bridge with a bottle of champagne. The day culminated with an ambitious afternoon parade through the streets of New Harmony, depicting the progress of human transportation. The march included 36 subjects, representing Native American dominance to the modern era, including Daniel Boone, covered wagons, horse and buggies, old cars, a Rolls-Royce, marching bands, and an overflight by airplanes, one with a stunt flyer. James Walsh was a participant that day.
I got involved with that through my uncle because I had a spotted pony. And we, as spotted pony people, I think there was 3 large ponies and then 2 medium-sized ponies and 3 or 4 small ponies. I had the medium-sized pony. I was asked to ride that as a Indian. The big Indians had a double pole building back to the ground with cloth or something in between the 2 poles, and a little Indian girl riding on that, which was a little unusual. And we had a little trouble keeping that little girl on there. She wanted to cry and tell us what to do and go to her folks. She didn't want to be any part of a bridge dedication.
For young Walsh, the day became even more challenging with the change in the weather.
We finally made it back to McKinley Church, and my folks met me there, and I was cold enough that I couldn't tell them my name, and that's when I encountered the first drink of whiskey I ever had. My mother made me a hot toddy and put me to bed and covered up my head and thought maybe I'd warm up. And I finally did.
With the waters of the Ohio to the south and the Wabash to the west, this corner of Indiana is framed by rivers. The area was often referred to as the Pocket District, suggesting a natural condition of isolation from neighboring states. In its first 10 years of operation, the Indiana Highway Commission developed approximately 6,000 miles of roads in Indiana, but the Pocket was underrepresented. Now the Harmony Way Bridge became the catalyst for a major thoroughfare connecting Louisville with St. Louis and was key in developing regional roads in this area of the country. Whether or not its prophecy would come true, the New Harmony Times proclaimed the Pocket of Indiana will no longer be looked upon as an outlying and segregated district. But the Depression of the 30s was a challenging period for the bridge company. By the end of that decade, they were interested in selling the bridge to the state of Indiana, and the state was interested in buying it. In 1939, the state legislature established the Indiana State Toll Bridge Commission for the purpose of purchasing the bridge, paying off the bond debt with tolls, and then setting the bridge free. The following year, the commission accepted a bid for a bond purchase of just over $1 million, but immediately ran into opposition. One commissioner, Marvin J. Briggs, originally agreed to the terms, but he quickly changed his mind, deciding that the price was too high. This opposition raised the issue of regional disharmony within the state, of whether the Pocket was getting its fair share. Certain northern interests were against the purchase, and the State Toll Bridge Commission itself reflected a regional divide. Briggs was from Indianapolis and general manager of the Farm Bureau, while the 2 other commissioners in support were from Corydon and Cannelton in the South. In an editorial, the Evansville Courier newspaper concluded that powers in the state's capital were once again preventing progress for southwestern Indiana. The opposition of Indianapolis newspapers and Indianapolis interests to public development in this part of the state over a period of years is a matter of record. It has been, in our opinion, a most short-sighted policy. In a later editorial, the Courier reported that an engineering firm's study supported the sale, and the paper urged that the Toll Bridge Commission move to buy the bridge, but the appeal was too late. By this time, the Carmi owners pursued other avenues. The same day the Courier editorial came out, the U.S. House Interstate and Foreign Commerce Subcommittee approved legislation to deal with the bridge issue. On April 14, 1941, President Roosevelt signed into law a bill creating the White County Bridge Commission. The commission was essentially a federally appointed version of the Harmony Way Bridge Company. The new charter authorized the commission to purchase, maintain, and operate the bridge, as well as the ferry that served the same location. The bridge was bought for $945,000 through a bond sale that would mature in 20 years. There was a provision in the charter allowing the bridge to be sold to the states of Illinois and Indiana if such an agreement could be reached. If not, then the commission would continue to operate the bridge, having, as the charter stated, perpetual succession of management. This arrangement defining long-term ownership of the bridge would dog it for the rest of its days. Day-to-day engineering issues rested with Don Blair, acting as bridge superintendent. Blair came with the Nashville Bridge Company when the bridge was built and was a well-known figure in New Harmony.
As far as we knew, Don Blair ran the bridge. He took care of all the money, and he actually took care of the bridge. He inspected the bridge himself to see if there was anything wrong with it. He rode on the ferry towboat and shoved the drift away from the piers. He was just the #1 man.
During this period, Roy Klippinger's influence grew considerably. While employed as bridge manager and running a newspaper, Klippinger was elected in 1945 to the U.S. House of Representatives as a Republican for the Illinois 24th District, which includes Carmi and White County. In 1948, he decided not to run for re-election and left the Carmi Democrat Tribune to start radio station WROY. 2 years later, he was back in the newspaper business, organizing the Carmi Times and developing several weekly papers in the surrounding area. The 40s and 50s were the most profitable years for the bridge. As World War II lifted the country out of the Depression, it also increased bridge business. Being the main thoroughfare between Louisville, Evansville, and St. Louis, the bridge carried a lot of traffic and collected some healthy revenues.
I don't think there's any doubt but what the farmers that used the bridge and the transportation resources available to get to the war plants that were developed during World War II in Evansville. I don't think they could have had the workforce that they had without that flow of commerce. And so it was a bridge that was participant in the national defense of our country.
As the bridge carried the needs of the industrialized war effort, another industry sprang up, oil production. In 1939, black gold came to White County, Illinois, spreading throughout the tri-state region into Indiana and Kentucky. Carmi doubled in population during this time, and the bridge was located in the right place to meet those needs. After the war, U.S. Highway 460 was extended west from Roanoke, Virginia to Louisville and St. Louis, traveling over the Harmony Way. Industry retooled in St. Louis and employed many Indiana workers.
They left their families in Evansville, and they'd spend the week over there, and then they came home, see the family on the weekends. Of course, now eventually they all moved over there, but it took a long time. I have worked certain shifts where I would never sit down for the 8-hour period. And then you had to check out every 8 hours so they would know how much your term did. And sometimes you didn't have enough time hardly to check out. You just check out on a run.
During this busy period, the toll house became the scene of a tragic accident. On an early morning in September 1949, Kenneth Pierce of Newcastle, Indiana, was driving his tractor-trailer truck on the bridge when, according to Pierce, his brakes failed. Working that day was 69-year-old Truman Stallings of New Harmony. Stallings was on the bridge deck collecting tolls when Pierce's truck hit him, crushing him against a parked vehicle. The injuries were severe. Stallings' legs were badly damaged. He suffered a concussion and sustained multiple fractures. Stallings was taken by ambulance to Deaconess Hospital in Evansville, where shortly before noon his right leg was amputated. He survived for 3 more days. State police cleared Pierce from any wrongdoing. Within 3 years of that accident, a new toll house was placed at its current and safer location at the entrance to the bridge on the Illinois side.
I think it was just too dangerous up there, and of course it should have been moved many, many years before. But it was very hectic working up there in the center of that bridge.
Truman Stallings left behind a wife, Luella, and son, Harold. His life as a toll collector is documented by letters written by Luella in the early 40s to Harold, who was in the Army during the war. The letters of a mother to her son reveal the day-to-day ins and outs of Truman working the bridge, the hours, the pay, the frustrations, and joys.
Truman said people crossing the bridge asked about you he never heard of. There were 2 girls came across Saturday from Illinois and asked about you. One was blonde and the other a brunette. They had a fuss over you on the bridge. Each said you was theirs, but Dad didn't know them. He said they were nice, not smarty, but pretty. I am sure anxious for the new uniforms to get here. Dad makes out like don't think much of them, but I think he's just kidding himself. It has rained all day and the wind blowed. I'll bet Dad is almost fizzled as he sure gets the air on the bridge. Volley is boasting a new toll house and Don fights it, and I don't know why. Dad had to double today. He worked until midnight, then back in the daytime. Over $300 today. He ate the biggest supper tonight. Don put a Christmas tree up on the steel beam across the bridge in front of the toll house. It is very pretty. Dad made a mistake about going to work last night. He goes tonight instead. They died laughing last night when he went tripping up there. Well, they got things so mixed up nobody could keep up.
Luella shared a conflict between Truman and Kleppinger over his salary.
Say, Dad got spunk up and went over to Clip's office yesterday and asked him why he was so much inferior to the other 2 toll keepers. And Clip said, "How do you know what they're getting?" Dad said they just openly told me, and they said they didn't give a damn who knew it. Clip told Truman the budget was already made until the first of the year. It sure got his goat. He thought he was putting something over. He is also working them 48 hours, which is against the law without time and a half pay. I went up Labor Day evening about 5 and helped Dad. I took tickets and counted them. He waited over 1,000 people. Boy, he was tired. I don't blame him for kicking. He may kick himself out of a job.
The conflict was apparently settled. In another letter, Luella said,
Clip come over the other day to talk to Dad and told him he was to share equal in salary and everything, $125 beginning January 1st. And he says I'll sign an affidavit to that if you want me to. Well, everything is running smooth now. Dad is going to work for Volley's shift so he can go bird hunting. Boy, $125 will look swell. Truman told Clip the concrete won't push half as hard for $125 as it did for $85.
This period of prosperity also brought some big problems. In a November 1956 issue of Look magazine, there appeared an article titled, "For Whom the Bridge Tolls." The report suggested that the bridge at New Harmony was a good provider for its friends. The story began. Once upon a time, there was a toll bridge that owned an encyclopedia. It also stockpiled 60 bottles of patent medicine. The mystery of the New Harmony Bridge is how such a busy bridge span had time to acquire so many possessions it didn't really need. The Look article was based on a U.S. House of Representatives investigation of corruption that started 4 years earlier with a private lawsuit and culminated with a federal lawsuit and a change in the bridge's charter. In 1952, a suit was filed in U.S. District Court demanding the White County Bridge Commission open its records for public inspection, which the commission had refused to do. But the court turned down the suit, claiming the private nature of the bridge meant that an average citizen had no right of access to the bridge's records. In 1955, a much brighter spotlight came from Washington. Leading the inquiry was Winfield Denton, a Democratic congressman from Indiana's 8th District, which included the bridge. Denton zeroed in on the absence of congressional oversight of the management of the bridge, and this first put the focus on Kleppinger and the commission. In a resolution introduced by Denton, the House voted for a special investigation into the financial position of the White County Bridge Commission and just when the bridge would pay off its debt and become free of tolls. Denton claimed the people of Evansville, New Harmony, and Mount Vernon were, as he put it, up in arms over the matter. The financial records showed the commission had collected nearly $3 million since the bridge was purchased in 1941. It currently owed $175,000 of remaining bond debt. Its monthly income, $22,000. Monthly expenses, $8,100. Cash on hand, $170,000. Denton declared to the House Rules Committee, "I think the commission is not very anxious to make this a free bridge." 2 months into that investigation, the last of the bond debt was paid off, and by the end of 1955, the Bridge Commission cut the tolls in half. But there were other issues. The General Accounting Office conducted an audit of the Bridge Commission's records for the previous 5.5 years, and they found questionable practices between the Bridge Commission and Klippinger's Carmi-Times newspaper operation, which shared space in the same building. The GAO audit concluded that business transactions, quote, were not always conducted on an arm's-length basis. Newspapers reported that Kleppinger and his business interest profited heavily from the operation of the bridge. One paper referred to it as a happy-go-lucky financial arrangement. The Denton Committee wrapped up its investigation in April 1956, and it pointed to corruption. Some of the findings included the commission bought a 10-year supply of toll ticket coupons from the Carmi-Times for $6,100, but the Times obtained them from a printing company for $1,000, a 572% markup. Equipment purchased by the Bridge Commission but used daily by the Times, including a typewriter, camera, encyclopedia, water cooler, air conditioner, and camera flashbulbs. Bills for long-distance calls by the Times one year were a fraction of the ones made by the Bridge Commission. Asked why the bridge would make so many calls, Kleppinger responded, "Well, that'd be hard to answer." Traveling expenses charged by the commissioners averaged about $3,000 a year. Asked about the billing of the meals in one trip totaling $160, Kleppinger said, "I've been the best dinner buyer you ever heard of." All told, questionable costs of the commission were estimated at over $69,000 for the 5.5-year period. The report also stated expenditures which are not readily ascertainable would probably add a number of thousands of dollars to that figure. The report bluntly accused the commission and Kleppinger of turning the bridge into easy money. It was clear the House committee had lost faith with the commissioners. It stated, as long as the present commission and its manager operate the bridge, it will never be free of tolls. The committee recommended changes to the bridge's charter, including the Comptroller General conduct an annual audit of bridge financial records, the current commissioners be vacated and new members appointed for 6-year terms, and the U.S. Bureau of Public Roads take over the bridge if the states of Illinois and Indiana do not. 3 months later, U.S. Attorney Clifford Raymer charged a grand jury with investigating the activities of the Bridge Commission. Eventually, the government settled for half of the $69,000 of questionable expenditures. During this period in 1955, the bridge reached its greatest traffic count for 1 year at just under 1 million vehicles.
Morning. Thank you.
The following year marked a decline in bridge business from which it would never recover. 15 miles downstream, the Wabash Memorial Bridge opened for traffic, and it also charged tolls. But unlike the Harmony Way, it was operated by the state of Indiana. In 10 years, traffic over the Harmony Way Bridge had lost an average of 200,000 vehicles annually from its high mark. The complex issues hanging over the bridge would drag on. In 1962, in a letter to a constituent, Denton was still complaining about the control that Kleplinger had upon the area. My difficulty is Kliplinger's influence in the state of Illinois. He owns 5 newspapers, and they have their effect. I think it's perfectly outrageous that Kleplinger continues to collect tolls on this bridge. Denton's investigation of the 50s culminated with new legislation, further strengthening congressional oversight of all bridge commissions. In April 1962, Public Law 87-441 essentially codified some of the key recommendations of that investigation, including an annual audit of the bridge commissions and the authority to appoint commissioners. Soon after, the chapter on Roy Kleplinger came to a close. 2 months after the bill's passage, he underwent a series of surgeries brought on by cancer and never left the hospital. Death came on December 24, 1962, 32 years and 3 days after he opened the Harmony Way Bridge to the public.
All things like that take a leader, and Mr. Kleplinger was a leader that they needed at the time to do that. And he was very aggressive in doing it, and he enjoyed the political part, and he did get it done.
Well, he just wasn't a ordinary man's man. He was a big shot. He was a politician, but we were his workers.
Winfield Denton continued to pursue the bridge. In 1966, he approached both governors about taking control, but without success. That same year, Denton lost his bid for re-election. He would retire from Congress, never being able to free the Harmony Way Bridge. Part of Denton's last effort centered around a new interstate highway planned across the Wabash a few miles upstream. In a letter to his Illinois congressional counterpart, Denton wrote, "I think it will be extremely difficult to collect tolls on the New Harmony Bridge when there's a free bridge within 8 to 10 miles of this bridge." The interstate was originally planned to run from Louisville, crossing the Wabash just north of Vincennes. In 1958, construction of a bridge at Vincennes was completed and dedicated for interstate highway use. But the interstate did not run through Vincennes. The arguments for shifting I-64 southward centered around the need to service the larger urban area of Evansville and to relieve the traffic along the highly traveled US 460. The concern of I-64 taking away significant traffic from the bridge, however, didn't pan out. The vehicle count over the Harmony Way remained consistent at just over 700,000 annually, and it would do so for the next 30 years. By the end of the 20th century, the White County Bridge Commission received news it would no longer be under federal oversight that was created by the '62 Charter. In 1998, Congress passed major legislation addressing a whole range of transportation issues. Its effect on the bridge was to streamline what it now saw as an antiquated practice, since the Bridge Commission was the only one of its kind left standing. The act rescinded the '62 statute to remove this unnecessary federal oversight of the White County Bridge Commission. As far as Washington was concerned, the bridge was on its own. At 70 years old, and with now dwindling toll receipts, its commissioners were increasingly desperate to secure access to state and federal funding. Into this scene enters the last bridge commissioner appointed by the feds, a recently retired university president, Dr. David Rice. 25 miles southeast of New Harmony, outside of the city of Evansville, lies the University of Southern Indiana. Rice was its founding president and worked there for 27 years. During his tenure as president, USI developed a close relationship with New Harmony. In 1985, it took over the management of Historic New Harmony, a program promoting learning and tourism. Historic New Harmony began in the 50s through public and private efforts, and by the 70s, the town saw a massive influx of money for renovating historic buildings and constructing new attractions. When Rice retired as president emeritus from USI in 1997, he and his wife moved to New Harmony. Around the same time, a position opened on the White County Bridge Commission.
So I knew it was important to the economic viability of the community and region, and that it would be an interesting project to work with.
Given the repeal of the 1962 statute, Rice asked a local law firm for clarification on the legal status of the Bridge Commission. It was determined that oversight still rested with Congress, since the original 1941 statute remained in place, and that included the reappointing of bridge commissioners. Without active federal oversight, the clock was ticking on finding a solution to the bridge, while the current commissioners were still around to manage it. At this time, another development threatened the bridge. In 1999, a new Indiana State Route 69 opened running north and south, bypassing New Harmony and linking Interstate 64 to the Port of Mount Vernon, one of the 3 major Ohio River shipping facilities in the state.
That took almost all of the truck traffic off of the bridge, and that was a significant part of the revenue that the bridge had. And that was when it really became critical to us that we knew that we were in problems.
The year following the opening of State Highway 69, traffic dropped on the bridge by 132,000 vehicles. 7 years later, in 2006, by 400,000 vehicles. This was approximately half what the bridge carried before the road was built. The loss of toll revenue was severe. In 2001, the Indiana Department of Transportation, INDOT, contracted an engineering study and favored construction of a new bridge at an estimated cost of $15 to $20 million, but neither state was interested. Another approach suggested by INDOT Commissioner Christine Klicka was that the Harmony Way Bridge and the Wabash Memorial Toll Bridge downstream combine their operations and fall under state control. Later, Klicka announced that she would resign her position, taking effect on September 10, 2001. The day following her resignation, the catastrophic events of 9/11 undercut any momentum that existed. Regardless of a long-term solution, the White County Bridge Commission announced it would close the bridge at the end of 2001 unless it could raise funds for repairs and upkeep. Tolls were doubled, but more importantly, the 2 states each provided $120,000 over the next 2 years, enough to keep the bridge running while the search continued for a permanent solution.
We were in the process of trying to follow up on a suggestion that Commissioner Klicka had, and that was that we would combine the Mount Vernon Bridge and the New Harmony Bridge and operate them as one. And that was basically on the Representative Weinzappel was attempting to do that, and then Van Haften likewise attempted to do that.
I remember we got the bill through the House, and I know we were able to get it into a conference committee report, which is right at the end of session. And in the end, there were a couple of senators from up north that objected purely out for political reasons, and it didn't get done, at least while I was state representative. So that was pretty disappointing, knowing that we had, what had been a decades-long problem of who's going to take ownership and responsibility of this bridge to make sure it can continue to serve the people of New Harmony, my constituents. And we get it almost up to the finish line, and then for political reasons, it ends up dying.
INDOT conducted a sustainability study that laid out a wide variety of options.
We had one INDOT commissioner in one of our meetings that came in and basically said, well, what if we just tore the bridge down and took a piece of it and made it part of some kind of monument in the town of New Harmony. And you want to be respectful and not laugh out loud. But to me, that wasn't, that was an individual that had no understanding of that town, its history, its potential, and the importance of that bridge to that town.
In 2005, first-year Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels also expressed an interest.
The governor's staff person came to Representative Van Haften and said, can we handle this in the governor's office instead of legislatively?
Rice organized a citizen support group. Meetings were held with state officials, and feasibility studies were conducted by local universities.
In May of '07, the new commissioner for transportation and the governor's chief of staff came down and said, we're here to, because the governor has asked us to come down and has asked us to put together a rehab plan and a way of financing the rehabbing of the bridge.
A public meeting was held in New Harmony involving Daniels' Chief of Staff Earl Good and INDOT Commissioner Carl Browning. Good made it clear, we did not come down here just to listen. The state ordered a comprehensive study by American Structure Point engineers later that summer. Structure Point estimated rehabilitation costing just over $7 million. They would assure at least 40 more years of service for the bridge. Then, on August 1, 2007, disaster struck again, this time in Minneapolis. The collapse of Interstate 35 into the Mississippi River gripped the nation and made people question the safety of bridges they travel every day. One troubling aspect of the event was that the bridge was not that old by bridge standards, having been in service for less than 40 years. As a result, the U.S. Department of Transportation issued an advisory to state transportation agencies and bridge owners to re-inspect all bridges similar to the one in Minneapolis. The governors of Indiana and Illinois issued orders for their states, and the Bridge Commission complied. The inspection of the Harmony Way Bridge, sparked by that event, found a crack in a pier support was expanding. By the end of September of '07, federal and state officials forced the closure of the bridge. It remained closed for 7 months while a new support structure was installed and the crack sealed. During this time, the spring rains brought their annual floods, placing a bridge under construction on the Illinois approach underwater. This made the closed Harmony Way the only alternative for trapped Illinois residents to get to and from their homes and farms. The bridge's reopening in April 2008 was highly anticipated. One person ready to cross the Wabash when the barriers came down was none other than the same James Walsh, who as a boy traveled across the bridge by horse during its grand opening in 1930.
Well, I'm proud to come back and see this bridge open because I know it is vital to farmers and to the community around here. It is their livelihood. People going back and forth across that bridge. Although they are charging a lot more money now to cross it. I believe it even charging it, walk your dog across it.
But with the cost of repair, the Bridge Commission's reserve assets were depleted. On top of this, the efforts that Rice and others were building with the state again dissipated. Now the Harmony Way had to weather a major national economic turndown, the largest since the bridge was built during the Great Depression. 3 years later, in late 2011, INDOT made an offer to Posey County. The state would provide $2.7 million, allowing the county to apply for matching funds if the county would take over the maintenance of 35 miles of state highways. The county commission held a public meeting and expressed its disinterest in that proposal.
I think it was positive in the fact that we got everybody out, their cards were on the table. I mean, Posey County's not taking over. The consensus from the people that were in attendance, the residents that were in attendance, was they don't want Posey County to take it over either. I mean, this has got to be a state issue. It's not a Posey County issue. It's an Illinois and Indiana issue. And even the people from Illinois that were there at the meeting that traveled the bridge said the same thing.
5 months later, in April 2012, the Commission conducted an inspection and concluded the bridge was too seriously corroded to ensure public safety. The following month, the bridge was closed, the second time in 5 years, but this time more permanently. Safety repairs were not ordered, and so the bridge remained closed. The closing brought INDOT back a month later with a more substantial proposal. Indiana would offer $10 million for the building of a new bridge, estimated to cost over $20 million. The proposal was presented by INDOT in a public meeting conducted by Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara and Senator Jim Toms and Illinois State Representative David Rice. Bridge Commissioner David Rice also attended and explained the alternative approach, which INDOT did not support, of rehabilitation for the existing bridge. The problem before the public was where the balance of the funds would originate.
So I think there is a great desire to get something done. You've talked and talked and talked. It's been bandied about for years. It's time to make a decision and either say no we're not or yes we are.
The bridge landed on the National Register for Historic Places in 2007, an acknowledgement of its importance in transportation and its unique design as a steel truss bridge. In 2012, the nonprofit Indiana Landmarks placed the Harmony Way on its 10 most endangered list.
But Americans really like things that are useful. The New Harmony Bridge is a bridge that needs to be used, and it needs to be used for the welfare of the communities in Illinois and Indiana.
The battle to save the 80-year-old Harmony Way Bridge or to replace it is still in limbo. Construction of highways and bridges to the north and south over time made the bridge at New Harmony lose its importance as a route for interstate travel. The intent of Congress to allow the states to take ownership if they chose planted a troublesome issue that it still struggles with today. Its private nature made the bridge unwanted by highway departments, a source of corruption, and a fighting ground for politicians. The Harmony Way Bridge needs to be fixed, replaced, or removed from the waters of the Wabash. The value we place upon this structure depends on how we see it, either as a utility that could support vehicular traffic or something else.
One of those things that, we take for granted until we don't have it. It's been there as long as we've been there, and it's, I know a lot of people said that last fall when it closed was, gosh, we miss that bridge.
Every bridge that I've been involved with throughout the United States over my career with the Park Service has always been, the success has always been based on the activity and interest of the local community. And one of the phrases I like to use is over my dead body, where you take down our historic bridge.
There's one thing that is, to my mind, is somewhat philosophical about the bridge issue. And it speaks to the whole issue, I think, of rural America. And where do we think rural America, plays a role in this country? I understand that from an economic perspective of the bridge, it may not be the greatest thing in the world, but it's still, there's a societal type issue here about people that want to preserve a certain way of life. And that's been, the bridge going away is detrimental to that way of life.
And over the last 30 to 40 years, since I was a young boy in southern Indiana, I've watched communities, I've watched the loss of the integrity of communities. And when you lose the built manifestations of your heritage and your history, you lose that sense of community. And when I go and I talk to organizations that are looking at historic bridges and they want to save their historic bridge, what they're really looking at is, I want to save that part of my past. I want to save what's unique about this community. We live in a world today which defines many communities by chain stores that all look alike and fast food stores that all look alike. And what makes one community unique from the other? And it's those manifestations of your history. Bridges are one element of that.